Hello, welcome to this video all about information in relation to the types of termite treatments that are available today. My name is Ryan Craig. I'm a licensed building and timber pest consultant, and I've got my own company, QC's Building Services, and I've been doing building and pest inspections in Brisbane for around 20 years now, and I'm licensed in all forms of termite control as well, pest control as well. So the video today, we're going to cover the types of termite treatments. There are three types of termite treatments, one being physical, which is a non-chemical form of treatment, which is a very more recent method. The other predominant, the one that's been the most common throughout time is the use of chemical termiticides. And then the most recent on top of physical has been the introduction of baiting stations, and I'm going to cover that and explain a little bit about them a little bit later. The application of any termiticide or termite control is governed in Queensland by the Australian Standard 3660. There's one for new construction and one for existing structures, part 1 and 3 I believe, also there's other legislation like the Pest Management Act. It's Queensland statute law, and the Health Act, Queensland Health Act as well. So you need to be licensed in all forms of Queensland Health licenses, and also you need to have a license with the QBCC to carry out this kind of work. So the first aspect is physical termite controls. This is a very more recent introduction to the termite treatments, and it began probably around the mid to late 1990s when a product called Termite, which is stainless steel mesh, came into effect and was begun to be used in construction, new construction, around the pipe penetrations for slabs and in some other areas by companies that were ahead of their time, really, because it wasn't legislatively required to be done until 2001. It's one of the more newer forms of termite controls, as I said, starting in the mid to late 90s. It's not overly common to be used with existing structures for houses that are already built and then have a termite issue. They more commonly have chemical termiticide application because it's a far more practical method to treat existing structures. But when you build a new house, you can put physical termite controls in all of the areas you need to, like around the pipe penetrations through the slab and around the exterior perimeter during the construction. So that's why it's quite common. It's also very common because in 2006 the Building Code of Australia, which is now the National Construction Code, was amended to state that there was a requirement for all new residential construction in Queensland that there be a design life for any termite control measure used for new construction of properties to be a 50-year minimum. So the chemicals that are used and were used up until that point only have a maximum lifespan of 10 years, depending on the termiticide used. So that can't achieve that 50-year, and that's why these physical termite controls are the most predominant form of termite control for new construction. They do have limitations. One of the positives, as I've just said, is they last a lot longer than the chemical version of termite controls, but they do have limitations. We have carried out many inspections over the years since this product has been used, and there's a variety of them which I'll elaborate on in a minute, where houses that were built some years before and we're inspecting 5-10 years later have actually had termites with a physical termite control measure. Why is this? It's because we believe it's because a lot of the physical termite controls are very inflexible, and termites only need a couple of millimeters to negotiate and move into areas. So when you get products that are physical, like stainless steel mesh, and they don't have flexibility, the termites just come up through that product. I'm using that as an example, but there are others that have also been prone to having termite infestation after having been installed during new construction. There's a number of different varieties. As I said, stainless steel mesh is one. It has a brand name of Termite. There's crushed stone or granite guard, as it's commonly known. Crushed glass is also used. PVC and aluminium. Those are the more common ones, but there's a variety of them. So all of them have different brand names, but that's basically covering the aspect of physical termite controls. We now move on to chemical termite controls. Basically, this is when a termite treatment is done and a chemical termiticide is applied to the soil that abuts the structure or is applied in a targeted area, and it's designed to bind with that soil and either repel or impede subterranean termites from gaining access into the structure. but some chemical termiticides actually allow the termites to pass through undetected of the chemical, pick up a fungus and then die, and then hopefully eradicate the nest, because termites cannibalize themselves when they're sick and die, so they pass on the sickness in that method. Nowadays, chemical applications or treatments are called treated zones, and years gone past they were known as chemical barriers. The reason for the change is, from chemical barrier to treated zone is primarily for litigious reasons or legal factors. A chemical barrier, which was used up until about 2005, roundabout, very much implies that there is a barrier there and it can't be passed. And based on litigation from people litigating against termite companies who used the term barrier, and then subsequent termite activity came in after a treatment was done, and the courts deciding that there was a false impression with the use of the word chemical barrier. So insurance companies and chemical pest control companies moved to the use of the word treated zone, which basically says that it's a lot safer for them. It's not saying that there's a barrier there. It's saying there's an area that's been treated and it's a zone, and it's designed to interfere or impede with subterranean termite entry into a structure. So there's a bit of a difference in what they're classified. In years gone by, chemical treatments were chemical barriers. Nowadays they're treated zones for legal protection and safety and based on legal precedent. It's the original type and for termite controls used in construction going back many, many years ago, before the physical termite controls came around. It's most commonly used now, chemical termite treatments, for existing structures where retrospective termite controls need to be placed around the perimeter of a structure and the soil is treated with a termiticide, primarily because it's impractical to put physical termite control measures around the exterior of a perimeter in the soil. They don't bind with soil, they have to be embedded into the structure. So chemical termiticides are what is used predominantly for existing houses that have a retrospective termite issue, and termites are found after they've been constructed. So the maximum design life for the termiticides available as of today, 10 years. There's 4 types of termiticides available with active constituents of the same ingredient. So ones of synthetic pyrethroid, you get organophosphates. There's 4 types, but they have many brand names. So there's about 150,000 brand names for only 4 active constituents that are available. One being bifenthrin, chlorpyrifos, imidacloprid, and fipronil. 3, 5, 8 or 10 years is the design life you'll get from either of the 4 chemicals, depending on which one is used and the application rate that's used at the time of treatment. Up to 1995, the chemical treatments that were used were inorganic compounds, organochlorines. They were banned in 1995 because they were extremely persistent, they didn't break down, unsafe for the environment, and then we moved to more friendly environmentally chemicals. Hence the lesser design life. From 1995 they only go for 10 years and they need to be replenished more frequently. So termite baiting stations, let's move on to termite baiting stations. Just one other thing on the chemical treatments for termite controls. They're not overly practical for new construction for exterior perimeter areas because their design life only goes for 10 years, but they can be used where a reticulation system is used around the exterior perimeter of a structure because it enables that to be replenished. It's like a hose system, irrigation system. So that can be, chemicals can be used for new construction to achieve the 50-year design life, even though they only go for a maximum of 10 because they can be replenished in a reticulation system as long as that system is used for new construction. Right, termite baiting stations. This is a bit of a bugbear of mine. It's the newest form of termite control or treatment. It seems to be the preferred method for the greater majority of the pest control or termite industry. In our opinion, that's purely based on cost benefit to the termite industry and termite consultants and treatment companies, and not for the effectiveness of the baiting stations. Why do I say this? Because our experiences have shown on many, many occasions, when at least 20, when we've done inspections on houses that have baits that are in existence, that have been present within the block for over 2 years, where termites are still found active in the fencing timbers and landscaping materials, and on several occasions within the interior of a structure. So that, if that's not evidence to show that they're completely ineffective in terms of stopping termites from gaining access into a structure, I don't know what is. But that's why we say that they're basically, in our opinion, useless, of limited value, despite the fact they're an approved form of termite control, because we've just done too many inspections where we find active termites in a structure or in the landscaping materials, despite the fact termite baits are present and have been for some time, even years, at a block. anyone considering using termite baits based on what I've just said should think twice and question their value, and seriously reconsider their use of this product as a termite control, not just for their limitations, but because of their extreme cost. And this is what I touched on before, is why the majority of the termite industry seems to prefer termite baiting stations as the preferred method of termite control. I'll give you an example. Say for a standard 4-bedroom, 2-bath brick veneer house on a 600 square metre block, average sized house on a level block. There's 2 ways you could put in termite controls to stop termites from getting into the structure for an existing structure that needs retrospective termite controls put in place, not for new construction. So you've got the chemical termiticide application that I talked about before, which would go around the exterior perimeter of the structure. Now, you could put a treated zone in for the exterior perimeter of a structure for a 4-bed, 2-bath for around $3,000 on average, including GST, as of 2019, those rough figures. But $3,000. Now, you'll get 10 years longevity. Doesn't need to be replenished. Nothing else needs to be done. Around $3,000. Some companies might charge 4, some companies might charge 2.5. But at the end of the day, you'll get a treatment that goes for 10 years longevity, according to the manufacturers of the chemicals available, that you don't need to do anything else with. So $3,000 for 10 years. Now, let's move to termite baiting stations for the same period. There'll be an initial cost to set up termite baits within a block at around $2,000, $1,500 to $2,000 for a company to come out and put in several termite baiting stations within a block. That's the minimum cost to start off with, just to put baiting stations in your block. There's nothing put around the exterior perimeter of the structure. It's all in the block. So nothing is there to stop termites from getting into the house if you use termite baiting stations. And then for every year after that, you'll sign a contract where the companies who install the termite baiting stations will engage you under contract to check these baiting stations and apply some sort of chemical or something if there is termite activity found within the baiting stations. So that's at a cost of around a minimum of around $1,000 to $1,500, depending on the companies and how many baiting stations are there. So initial cost around $2,000 to put in the baiting stations. And then for every year after that, for 10 years, you've got a $1,500 cost on average, some $1,000 depending. So let's just say 10 years at every year being monitored, $10,000 plus your 2 at the start, $12,000. So we've got a $12,000 cost for 10-year termite controls using termite baiting stations for a slab on ground property, which based on our experiences is extremely limited and of low value because we've done so many inspections where baiting stations are in place and termites are still in the structure. Or you have a $3,000 option to have chemical termiticide put around the exterior perimeter of the structure, and you get 10 years with no requirement to do any other additional work or follow-ups or inspections. Annual inspections are recommended as just normal part of the procedure, as they would be with termite baiting stations, but there's no cost to inspect any baiting stations. So do the maths, 12 grand, 3 grand. Why then do the termite control industry proffer termite baiting stations so much? There's $9,000 difference there. You be the judge. We've concluded or formed our opinion based on our experiences and how effective or ineffective we see termite baits. We'll leave it up to you. On top of the huge price differential with the baits, just also consider, remember there's nothing if you use baits around the exterior perimeter to stop termites from getting into the structure, whereas with a treated zone there is. Treated zones, chemical treated zones are continuous and right around the perimeter of a structure. There's nothing around the exterior perimeter not protected when you use the treated zone at $3,000. And just simply pose the question, why would termites go to baiting stations in the yard when there's a lovely food source for them within the block, being the house? We know that they don't just go to the baiting stations and ignore the house, because we've seen it too many times that they go to the house and ignore the baiting stations. So one other thing, a couple of other things to consider with baits. The Australian standard also states that termite baiting stations should not be used as a standalone termite control measure, and it should be used in They should be used in conjunction with other forms of termite control, like treated zones and other stuff. Despite our pessimism and thoughts about the effectiveness of termite baiting stations, they are an approved form of termite control under the Australian standard, so that should be acknowledged. One other form of chemical termite controls that is also used, that is not just liquid soil treatment around the exterior of a perimeter of a structure, is you can get termite dusts and termite foaming that is carried out if active termites are found in a property where liquid foam is injected into a wall cavity where termites might be present, or arsenic trioxide is applied into, dust that is, into active termite workings at the time they're discovered, and then you wait for 14 days before the actual treated zone is done, the big treatment around the exterior perimeter. So that's the only other form of chemical termite controls that can be implemented, and that is the arsenic dusting and the liquid foaming done at the time active termites are found. So let's go to how to determine the effectiveness of chemical and physical termite controls. It's impossible to ascertain with existing residential structures whether or not there are effective termite control measures in place comprehensively or concisely. If you're provided with any certification, the reason for that you can't determine if there's any effective termite controls at a property is because there's so many areas you can't inspect in the wall cavities around the exterior perimeter and those kind of things. So it's just impossible to determine that. The providing of any documentation to state that termite control measures has been done and is current at a property does not mean that they're effective, and just important for you to recognise that. So don't assume that if you're giving certification or documentation to say a treatment is present, that it is effective. It might not be. It might have been compromised, and there might be areas not treated properly that aren't effective. Basically, the only method to try and determine if a chemical treated zone is effective is by taking specialised samples of soil from around the structure and getting them tested by an approved and accredited laboratory for soil analysis, and that could determine whether or not there's any termiticide in the soil, and you'd get certification for that. But even if you did that, it wouldn't tell you if the perimeter is protected conclusively, because you'd have areas that soil samples weren't taken from the exterior of the perimeter. It would be a good guide, but you wouldn't take soil from around the entire exterior perimeter of the structure. So there's always limitations with determining if treatments are effective completely or not. It's preferable to know that one is current and present, but very difficult to determine it is completely effective. With physical termite controls, it's impossible for the reason of visual inaccessibility and concealment. You can't see what termite controls are in place around the pipe penetrations through the concrete slab because it's not visually accessible to see that, nor can you see the physical termite controls around the exterior perimeter of the structure, which are the two areas you need to protect when you build a new house. Pipe penetrations through the slab and exterior perimeter of the structure. So with physical termite controls, it's impossible to determine their effectiveness as a consumer, but based on what we've seen over the years, we know that they are not infallible, and many houses that were protected with physical termite controls at the time they were built have subsequently had termite infestation occur because we've carried out inspections and found them. So I hope you found this information informative in relation to information on termite treatments and the types of termite controls that are available, and thank you for watching the video.